Where do you think Marcus Smart can pick up the slack for Tyus? Because the last thing I'll say is what intrigues me a lot is, as good as Tyus was, you can't really close out that many games with Ja and Tyus because of the defensive stuff. Marcus Smart can actually slide right into those lineups. So what are your overall thoughts on that?
So I think that's actually the reason why they decided to go with Marcus Smart, is because Tyus, with Tyus, they did run some lineups with Ja and Tyus to close those Timberwolves series, and it did work in that series, but that's just not something that's going to work very consistently because of the stuff on defense, like you said. So I think that adding Marcus Smart, you're adding somebody that can play with Ja, because I just feel like as the GM, like you have to have guys that complement your star players well. And as good as Tyus Jones was when Ja wasn't out, he just wasn't as good coming off the bench. And, when guys are healthy, he's going to be coming off the bench. He had to be a little bit, better in that role at times, I feel like. But like you said, when he was a starter, and I think he's a starting point guard in this league. And I really feel like that's one of the reasons why the Grizzlies traded him when they did. They could have traded him at the end of last season, or Tyus could have just walked, but I think they signed him to that 2-year deal, knowing that if they didn't win it all this year, they were probably going to send him somewhere and let him be a starting point guard somewhere else. Like that's really kind of what it felt like last season. But with Marcus Smart, he's not the same level of I think he's a good playmaker, but he's going to turn the ball over a little bit more. Obviously Tyus Jones led the league in assist to turnover ratio the last 3 or 4 years, so he's not that level of playmaker that Tyus Jones is, and I think that is going to hurt them a little bit. But I think that you're going to make up for a lot of that on defense, and I think you're also going to benefit from playing Marcus Smart with Luke Kennard as well too, because that's somebody who's going to get a lot of open looks out there. And this is also a guy, Marcus Smart, who knows how to play off of other superstar players because he's played with Jason Tatum, with Jaylen Brown. So I feel like he's going to be one of those guys who knows when Ja does come back, how to play with, he might be the fourth option out there, when Ja, Jaren, and Bane are all healthy. And but I think he's going to be okay with that because that's something that he's used to. And I think that that's going to be big for them. And I think they're also going to run a lot of lineups where Smart is basically just going to take over what Dillon Brooks was doing, even though, he's not as tall as Dillon Brooks, and maybe he can't match up with as big of players, but I feel like he plays much bigger than 6'3". I think everybody can agree with that. And I have no issue with him guarding the majority of small forwards in the NBA if that's who he's going to be guarding. So I think you're going to see a lot of lineups where they're going to go with Ja, Smart, and Bane at the end, and then run Jaren and Steven Adams on the interior. And I think that's a really solid 5 to go with. So I think with Marcus Smart, he's definitely going to help. And then they added Derrick Rose to kind of be the backup point guard as well. We'll see how much he actually has left in the tank. But I think the biggest thing for D Rose is going to be his mentorship with Ja and stuff like that. Just because I feel like D Rose is the type of dude that Ja is definitely going to listen to. Because when you look at Ja play, you can tell that he got a lot of his stuff from D Rose. They do a lot of stuff that's very similar. So I think if there's anybody that you could get to talk to Ja and kind of mentor him, I think Derrick Rose is the perfect guy. And I think early in the season, he's probably going to get a lot of reps at backup point guard. But we'll see kind of how that goes throughout the season once Ja comes back and everything like that. But I think at the beginning of the season, that's definitely going to be fine as a backup point guard too.
Yeah. To start about the Tyus and the Smart comparisons, are really just a trade in general. I think for me, obviously when I first saw it, because of the picks, I was like, because again, I'm so used to the Grizzlies not trading their picks that I was kind of like what? Like it was a weird thing because I didn't know what they were going to trade out when they said Smart's going to the Grizzlies. So I saw it, and then I slept on it, and I was like, I'm good, because when I thought about what picks they gave up, it wasn't that bad. And really, to what you were talking about, with the lineups and playing them together, I was a big proponent even though it worked in that series. I never liked the Ja Tyus lineups because of the lack of basically the size with Tyus and the defense that he had. And basically, not to say he can't shoot the ball, but he's not a shooter or making enough shots like that. And Ja's obviously more of a slasher. So it didn't really, to me, compensate for a lot of the stuff. So you were basically small out there with no real advantage. Now with Smart, like what Bryson's saying, I've been big on saying, like, look, you need to get guys that can complement your trio. Like, that's what it is at this point. It doesn't matter about whatever, but what goes on after that. Like, if a player doesn't complement what Ja, Jaren, and Bane do, then it's gonna be hard for them to have a place on this team. And so for Smart, I think he does that perfectly, because now you can slide him in, obviously, at the 2 or the 3. Now, again, I know it's a little bit smaller, which we'll get into later. I have my concerns about them being, that being a starting lineup per se, but I do like it in spurts, because like you said with Kennard shooting the ball this past year, I think him and Bane, that little combo of lineups last year was like killing teams, basically, like when they were out there on the court together. So now with Smart being out there, I think obviously for the first 25 games at least starting, again, I don't think he's going to be the same playmaker like Bryson was saying as Tyus will. But again, he's a guy that was a defensive player of the year, and obviously he's an upgrade defensively. So, I think he'll be able to fit in again, because he's shown to be able to fit in with that Celtics team. Because at times, even though you could say he was arguably their third or fourth best, or basically third or fourth best player, there were times where, Horford or Derek White or somebody had it going, and he's basically like the 5th or 6th option. But he was still doing the little things to win the game. So I don't think we have an issue with, per se, Ja, Jaren, and Bane basically, being the main go-to guys, and then maybe a guy like Luke having a night. You know what I mean? Like he'll still be focused on winning the game. And so, I'm not really too concerned about it. I really like Smart in that regard, and obviously just for the locker room stuff, people said that the Grizzlies needed a vet. And so that was kind of just the biggest thing that people said, that they needed more veteran leadership. And I've been said that too. I said that the past year they need a guy, not only a vet that just can be a vet, but a guy that can play with them. Like, it's different to have a vet like a Udonis Haslam that's just there talking, but it's a real big difference when you got a vet like for the Celtics with Al Horford that can still play and play 30 some minutes in an NBA playoff game. Like, it's just a totally different thing. So I think that is what Smart brings. So you got a guy that's been there and done that now a little bit more. And so I think that'll help a lot. So yeah, I mean, and obviously with the Rose thing, I mean, again, another vet, because I think he, will play early on. But again, just like for the Ja comparison, I mean, I really mainly think that is what it's for. Because, Ja looked up to Rose, obviously, as we see, I think right after he got signed, like Ja was talking about Rose or like tweeted something. And again, Ja's been out the, social media because of the whole thing. He came back to say something about Rose. So, he's obviously excited about that, him being his teammate. And, so I think that's just really the biggest thing about the moves, is that they weren't really the flashiest moves per se. Like if you look at them, but I do think they'll have a lot more value off the floor, or they'll have the same amount of value off the floor as they do on the court. So, I was really, once I sat with the moves, I was really satisfied with them.
Yeah, it took me some time to like understand the trade, because again, like this was a trade that was already set to be done. It wasn't going to be 3 teams involved, and then very last second, they trade Tyus Jones. But from the Memphis side, again, like I can't, I have so much praise for the front office, because they know when to get rid of value before it becomes dead value. And ultimately, I don't think they wanted to pay Tyus long term when they have Bane and all these other guys coming up, especially with the younger talent. And Memphis has always been a roster that, sure, we have our 3 best players, but we also are focused on developing the other players around them, like Asante Aldama, and players of that nature. But speaking of these younger players again, and this is me putting my Golden State hat on, okay? What I remember vividly in the playoffs, okay? Dylan Brooks gets suspended. And I'm saying, damn, he got suspended, because they put Zaire Williams in the game. And Zaire was like, okay, maybe I'm gassing it, right? But I'm telling you right now, I felt natural fear looking at Zaire. I think Zaire could be a really good player. Last year, I'm not quite sure what happened with his circumstances and his overall situation. I heard that he got older. He didn't play in the summer league. What do you think of his place on this team? Is he going to be a guy that gets more time to play and like naturally develop, or do you think they're going to move on and move in another direction, maybe favoring a guy like Kenny Lofton over him?
So I think that they still have big plans for Zaire. I think the thing that really messed him up last year was he had tendonitis at the beginning of the season. So he missed the beginning of the season. And it really just felt like he might have came back a little bit too early, because when he came back, he didn't look 100% healthy. He just didn't look like he was really at like. I feel like so much of his game, especially last year or his rookie season, was predicated on him getting out in transition and stuff like that. And he didn't really get to do a lot of that. And then the other thing is when Zaire was playing really well, like you mentioned, it was when Dylan Brooks wasn't playing. So he was playing a lot more with the starting lineup. So when he was out there playing off of Ja and Jaren and Bane, I felt like he played a lot better because he was kind of in a different role. But then when he was playing more with bench units last year and he wasn't really 100%, and I felt like that combination just really wasn't good for him. And I think that's why, like, near the end of the season, they didn't really have him playing. And I think going into the offseason, they were talking about this summer, the reason that they gave as to why he didn't play Summer League is because he's going through his own kind of rehab process and stuff with his knee, just to try to, like, not to aggravate it anymore. Like, they had a workout plan put together for him to get a little bit stronger and stuff like that. And they were going to put that over playing in the Summer League, especially because, like, when you talk about the Grizzlies, they do have a lot of young players. Like David Roddy had to get minutes. Jake LaRavia was going to be playing a lot. Kenneth Lofton Jr. was going to be playing a lot. They added GG Jackson. So it was like there's a lot of guys who play that same position that were going to play Summer League. So in that way, I think they kind of thought that, Zaire isn't going to play that. And the year before, he had played really well in Summer League and kind of showed, I think, what they needed him to show for Summer League. So I think that's why he didn't play. If it was up to me, I still would have liked to see him during the summer just because of how the season ended, but I will always take health over reps, especially at this point. So I think that, especially when it comes to Summer League games, if it's the playoffs, it's a different thing. But for Summer League games, you're always taking health over reps, regardless of what it is. So I think overall, I think it should be good for him, and I think as long as he comes back 100% healthy, I think he has a chance to make a really big impact on this team. It'll be interesting to see how they use him and then like what kind of lineups they put him in. Because like I said, he played a lot better with the starters than with the bench. But and there's a very good possibility at the beginning of the season, they do start with Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, and Zaire Williams, and Zaire Williams starts at the 3. Like that's a very real possibility. A lot of people have probably said they're going to start Kennard instead, but I think Zaire does have a good chance, especially if he has a good training camp, just because of what he does on defense. He's not the level of shooter and stuff that Luke Kennard is, but you go back to that series, Steph still scored when he scored, but I felt like he did a really good job as a rookie on the greatest shooter to ever walk the planet. I thought he did a really good job when he had to guard Steph Curry.
He was a real playoff player. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so it's one of those things where it's like, when you see that, I still think that player is there. I just think the injuries and like the situations around the season, it just really didn't go its way. But I hope that they're not going to move on from him. I don't think they will. Zach Kleiman, our GM and everything, has said that, they believe in Zaire and all that. I know that you can only believe like 25% of what GMs say in the media, but it sounded sincere when he said it, so I think they still believe in him. Coach Jenkins still believes in him. He's going to get a lot of minutes this year. And I think that if he's healthy, he's going to have a really big impact.
Yeah, I was basically saying the same thing. Basically just in the injury and the confidence. I think they both go hand in hand. I think when him being injured, that kind of just messed up his confidence, and you could tell. And then on top of that, like what Bryson was saying, the role that they wanted him to play versus the role that he was in the year prior was different. So just a lot of different things going on, because to me, how they viewed it, when you get rid of basically Melton and Kyle Anderson, and then you basically didn't make a move outside of that, you wanted Zaire to basically move up to be one of the top 8 rotation guys. Because like you said, to your point, about to go to the playoff series, that game 2 where Josh scored like 47 points, Zaire was like the second leading scorer in that game. Like, not only just defending, but like if Zaire doesn't hit the big shots that he did and doesn't defend the way we're down
breaking shots too.
Yeah, he was. We're down. Oh yeah, for sure. We're down 0-2 because Bane hurt his back in game 1. Jaren was still having the foul trouble and wasn't consistent offensively. So somebody had to get enough points, especially when Ja was like just going crazy. Like, somebody just had to hit big shots, and that's what he was doing. And so, I think, that along with the stretch that he had that rookie year, to me gives me confidence that, there's a player still in there. Because again, I don't think, that especially a guy in year 2 is just done. I'm big on guys like you don't really know what guys are as players until you like really year 4. By the time you get to year 4 or 5, you kind of know what they are. Not to say they can't get any better or after that, but I'm saying like you kind of have a good idea of what they're at. So I'm not gonna write him off after 1 year. Again, I don't think the Grizzlies are either. I think they're gonna give him plenty of opportunity to show that he's still the guy they wanted to take at number 10. Because again, in theory, because I was high on Zaire because of the simple fact of I'm not gonna say he's this player, obviously, but I felt like he could do a lot of the things that Mikal Bridges was doing early on in Phoenix because of in terms of how like to make shots, play defense, do stuff like that. That's the wing they wanted to have, a guy that basically could provide versatility with size because he is 6'9", 6'8". He is a taller wing. And so I think that's kind of the vision that they had. And I don't think that vision is too necessarily far off. I'm not gonna say he's gonna be Mikal, but just doing those type of things as a utility wing, I think is still possible. Again, I just hope he's healthy. Again, like what Bryson said, I wish he would have played Summer League, but I'm not going to trip over it. But I do think there's a chance he could start. That's really my hope. It's him or Jake. I think those are the two guys at the wing spot that I really feel like one or both of them really need to kind of basically, show some stuff this year. And I think they'll have enough opportunity to show it. But yeah, I think Zaire, I'm not going to be out on Zaire yet. Like when you show me stuff in the playoffs, that kind of holds a lot of weight to me because that shows in the biggest moments you can show up. Like Brandon Clark to me, like again, I'm confident that he'll come back and be good. And I've seen what he's been able to do in the playoff. And the same with Zaire. I've kind of seen, and again, it wasn't crazy, but he had a playoff moment. And those little moments matter. Like every team has guys where they'll have the little moments. And so I think Zaire is still a big part of this team, and I'm hoping that he can stay healthy and really show it because if he does, that's another person that changes the trajectory of how the season looks. You know what I mean? And not only him, but you got Santi Aldama. Like you got guys that can change the trajectory if they make a bigger leap than what you expect them to be. So, I do believe that Zaire is still, a big part of this team. So, yeah.